Hey there, everybody. Thanks for joining me for another one-man review. Today I'll be taking a look at the first volume of Jiro Taniguchi and Yumi Makurabaku's The Summit of the Gods. This is based on a novel called The Summit of the Gods, a two-volume novel, I guess. So this is an adaptation written by Yumi Makurabaku and drawn by the maestro, Jiro Taniguchi. I think, all of the Taniguchi stuff that Fanfare has translated, and I savor it, so I kind of just dip into a new one every now and then in the midst of all my other reading. And I've been saving The Summit of the Gods because it's a 5-volume series. And also, like, my favorite comic of all time, or one of my top 3, I would say, The Climber is getting ready to come out, so I wanted to read this before The Climber came out. It's kind of unfair to hold this up to The Climber because The Climber's so goddamn good. But also, Jiro Taniguchi's so goddamn good, so I was excited to jump in and read this and get me hyped for The Climber coming back out. And I've been putting this off because I've been looking forward to it. Obviously, this is about mountain climbing. We open with a representation of a historical event where people were trying to climb, I believe it's Mount Everest for the first time. Really, right out the gate, you get Jiro Taniguchi doing what he does best, which is drawing environments and also working in tones. You start out with some painted pages. I'm assuming these were probably in color at first, but they're presented here in black and white. And then right away you see kind of his masterful use of tones is one of the things that he's really exceeds at. And you see that here with the reflection of the mountain and the goggles. I think is really cool and really well done. So this opening sequence shows the first attempt to go up onto the peak of Mount Everest, and the climbers Mallory and Irvine disappeared and died up there. This character here, Noel Odell, was back at camp and never saw them. So that's just setting up the real world history. This book goes on to include some real world characters, and then there's some fictional characters, and I'll explain more about that as we go. You see here some more of Taniguchi's just amazing patience, or his studio. I don't know who's doing this. I think he does it all himself. Maybe, I don't know. It seems like he cares more about the environments than the characters, so I'm assuming he's doing these. But whatever's going on at his studio, you get these amazingly detailed cityscapes and landscapes with so much cool stuff going on with the tones and all these handmade textures. Just super labor-intensive stuff. And it's on every page. I mean, you can see, you turn the page and you go down into the city, and there's never a panel wasted. I mean, every now and then, just to give the audience a breather, you'll get some white backgrounds. But Taniguchi is not someone who takes shortcuts at all. So we meet the main character of the book, who is a fictional character, I believe, Makoto Fukamachi, and he is a photographer who was in town to take pictures for a climbing expedition trying to go up on Mount Everest. While he's there, he stumbles upon an old camera in a mountain climbing supplies store, and all. They're kind of like a pawn shop that this camera shows up in, and he starts to realize that this camera, given the camera that it was and when it came out, was very likely the model that Mallory had with him during his assault on Mount Everest in 1924. So he thinks, oh my God, I found this very rare piece of equipment. It may even still have photographs that they took, and that could rewrite the history of mountaineering. So that's what at least this first volume is about, is very much, but I think it's the story itself is probably all 5 volumes, is this character learning more and more about the history of mountain climbing, and especially mountain climbing on Mount Everest, in relationship to the camera that he's found. And I think that's just a really cool, interesting story structure that allows the writer to give the audience a bunch of information about a world that they've investigated and done research on and know a lot about, but in an interesting kind of mystery context where that information can unfold as like oh cool, the next piece we get. I think it's a really interesting educational kind of approach. Eventually Fukumachi runs into this character that people are calling Bika Samp, but we find out later is Joji Habu, a very famous, and I looked this up, this is based on a real world climber who was kind of like known as a lone wolf character, hard to work with, but he's the man who originally found the camera, and so Makoto has to deal with him. We also learn a lot about this character's history. Obviously, as a mountain climbing book, we're going to have to celebrate the different mountain faces that are being climbed and all of that, and you can see that Taniguchi spares no expense in the detail. Like every little tree is rendered and everything's like hatched. Actually, the hatching texture I don't like so much. I kind of like this where he's filling things in a little bit more, but just beautiful art all around, really showing the scale and scope of what these mountains are and what it would be like to encounter them. You learn that Joji Habu had a really early experiences with mountains young that kind of gave him the taste for wanting to be up in the mountain. Really got a beautiful image here of like him just climbing and climbing and climbing and finally hitting the top of where he was at and getting this further view. I really miss hiking. I used to hike a lot with my friend Levi, and then me and Tori used to hike before she got disabled. I know that feeling. I love it. It's one of the best feelings. I would never be a mountain climber like this because I'm too much of a sissy, but I get it. I really get, and I connect with, and I think that's probably why I connected with the climbers so much as well. There's that desire to push where no one ever has been before, that sense of curiosity, the sense of removal, just as someone who likes a lot of alone quiet time. I get all of that. Like, I get why these guys get obsessed with it. But then you start seeing what they have to go through, and it's like, well, I just admit I'm not that tough. And you start to get some amazing sequences here where you have actual like rock climbing involved in the mountain climbing, and you find out that this is Habu's real talent. It was not so much the hiking up the mountains, but that he's a master climber. Now, sequences like this, as beautiful as they are and as amazing as the rendering of this mountain is, it's all hand done, hatching, awesome. This is where I think one of the places that the climber sets itself apart from this book, now that I've read some of this and all of the climber, is that Sakamoto Shinichi is such a powerful artist with the human figure that he can really distort perspective and take advantage of like the action tropes in manga of the really extreme foreshortening and stuff to add more tension to the climbing scenes. Whereas Taniguchi is very much bound by a more realistic kind of perspective on things. Obviously, a lot of photo reference, historical photos of people climbing, stuff like that. This just feels more bound by reference to me versus Sakamoto Shinichi's work, which has a lot of imaginative aspects and really ramps up, therefore, the tension of climbing. Like when you're climbing, I'm assuming you're hanging off the side of this cliff. It's very tense. I kind of miss some of that. That's the one thing, is because Taniguchi's art is usually so calm, and like The Walking Man, it's this healing art. It's meant to soothe. I think he has a little bit harder time with creating the real tension. But you get some amazing sequences, like right here, where he is drawing Habu, saying that if he were hanging off the mountain and it came to like both people were going to die, or if he cut the rope he could save himself, everyone else is like, no, we both die. And he's like, nah, fuck that, I'd cut the rope, it makes sense. But you see a switch in Taniguchi's style here where he actually goes in and does rendering of value. Normally, that's only done with the tones, and really beautiful cross-hatching all throughout that creates a very kind of menacing look to the guy's face. But Taniguchi's not like the best with expressions and stuff. He's not the best cartoonist, and so he's relying more on atmospheric stuff. It works very well, but I think that puts him at a disadvantage for some of the climbing scenes because they feel a little bit more static. but you're also still constantly getting these reminders of like how dangerous this environment is. So this Habu character gets famous for climbing the demon slab in the winter, which is like something no one's ever done before, and puts his name into the records. The drive that these guys have feels very familiar to me. I think that's a huge part of what I connected to in The Climber as well, is this idea of climbing to the highest peak and pushing yourself to be that guy. They talk about that here in reference to Joji Habu. Something inside him was, it's hard for me to articulate, but something frightening, like a devil dwelled inside of him. And it probably won't ever let him give up mountain climbing. And that's often how I feel about art. Like, there's a lot of times where it really takes a lot out of you. It takes a lot out of me, at least. Like, I just finished, pounding through this summer to get all of the inking for Bound done before I have to go back to work. And I'm super happy with how it came out, all of that. But I'm, like, super exhausted, too. And in those moments, you kind of wish, like, I just want to go back to being, like, I want to go to, I've never been there, so I can't say go back, but, like, I just want to be a normal person who has no ambitions and, just kind of earns a paycheck and comes home. But like it says here, the mountain will probably never let him go. Like, the art will never let me go. It's something, and then here he says he can't live any other way. And my brothers actually told me that before. It's like, you can't be anything else. That's just what you are. So I identify with that very heavily. And I think there's something about the solitude of the mountain climber and the solitude of the artist, or at least, I like the solitude of art making and hiking and things. So when you get images like this, even though it's not about an artist, to me it feels like a character that I can identify with very heavily. And I think that's, what I like about these climbing stories. I just really like these climbing stories for some reason. Later in the book, as we learn more about Habu, we learn that he made really close friends with kind of almost like a disciple of his, someone who really looked at him as a master, and they would go on climbs together, just the two of them, Buntaro Kishi, and they wind up in the exact situation of, like, look, you're both going to die if this guy doesn't go down. He's going to pull the other guy down. And so he's in this actual situation where he has said he would cut the rope, but now it's someone he really cares about, and he can't cut the rope. So that the way that plays out impacts his future. I don't want to give away all the details of this, but here's some stunning imagery that gives you a sense of, like, the drama of it all. But again, this is more like from the photographer's point of view. So that's a cool, like, little piece of the story there that I don't want to give away more. Then we introduce, towards the end of this volume, Sunio Hase, and Sunio Hase is the new young upstart. Even though he's only like 3 years younger than Habu, he's an upstart, and he's doing things solo, which is really wild once you read the explanation of what it is. But he's also redoing things like the Devil's Wall that Habu has done, but now he's doing them solo, and so he's like kind of one-upping him. So now there's a competitor to go up against, someone, who's to be seen as like an enemy in a way. Also, in this sequence, it describes what solo climbing is, and it's absolutely bananas. I didn't realize this aspect of it. I thought they kind of just went up. But because of the extra weight that they have to carry, what they're doing is they're going up, setting all the lines, setting all the anchor points with no weight on them, so it's safer and easier. Then they're going back down, putting the backpack with all the stuff on it and going back up. So if you're solo climbing, you basically have to climb the height of the mountain twice to peak it once, which is totally nuts. I had no idea. I thought they just carried the extra weight up with them. So really interesting stuff to find out about the characters. And then by the end of this first volume, you realize that what's happening, or what will be happening in the second volume, is that Sunio Hase has already climbed 2 of the 3 faces of Mount Everest. And he's headed towards the most difficult one, which is the Grandest Jurasis. I don't know how to pronounce that. It seemed to be the most difficult wall in the European Alps. And the what it looks like here is pretty goddamn steep. So the idea that someone would solo climb this in the winter seems pretty banana pants to me. But now there's going to be a race between Hase and Habu to see who can do it first. Because Habu's like, no, I can't let this dude who's beaten all my records be the first guy to do that. I got to be the first one to do it. So this real like sense of just possession to accomplish something that drives these guys, I find makes very compelling stories. And yeah, this is a beautiful, gorgeous book. And anything I'm saying about like referencing the climber versus this one in terms of like the drama and stuff, I mean, I'm talking about like the one of what I would say is top 3 comics of all time, and then still someone who's one of the great masters of all time. So I don't mean that to diminish the art in this book, because the art in this book is absolutely stunning in its own regard. It's just like kind of a different approach, where this is the most dynamic thing you'll see maybe. So yeah, I'm not knocking on Taniguchi at all. There's still things like this that I kind of just sit there and stare at and wonder over the beauty of it. So very beautiful book. I look forward to reading the rest of the series. I'm not sure if I'll do videos or not. We'll see, because with Taniguchi, it's kind of like, look how awesome his backgrounds are, look how awesome the tone is. I think this is a pretty good explanation of the story. But if there's anything I find in the later volumes, or if the story goes somewhere I wasn't expecting it, then I will make follow-up videos. But really, if you don't have Jiro Taniguchi's work, I would recommend going to the Fanfare website, the Pokemon Fanfare website, and just ordering everything they have. They have all the English translation of Taniguchi's stuff, and it's all impeccably reproduced, beautiful art, great stories. You just should have this if you care at all about comics.
Back to the land, let's get away, just for one day.